Well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Ranger Show. My name is Russell Gerber. Big welcome to all of you out there. Thanks for joining us from all over the world. Just a little disclaimer, I'm a little under the weather today, so I'll try not to sneeze on the microphone. Just a little cold. All is well, so don't worry too much about me. Don't forget to send in your questions. Give us a shout out. Let us know where you're from. It's always a pleasure to hear where you're coming to us from. And don't forget to pop your name in the question as well, just so that I know who I'm talking to. Good welcome to another beautiful winter's afternoon. We are, of course, starting off at Tembe today. In the very mild winters of the KwaZulu-Natal region. And a good number of elephants hanging around this afternoon. And looks like all the boys hanging out together. As usual, we tend to get a lot of the boys hanging around. At Tau, we've been seeing quite a lot of the breeding herds coming down. Tembe seems to send us all the boys. We've just crossed over to Rosie's now. Have a little look around and see what we've got hanging out by the waterhole. A quick hello. Hello, Magda. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. Stephanie. Good morning. Hope that cup of tea is treating you well. And Marcel, hanging out in the Netherlands today. That sounds pretty great. Welcome to all of you. Of course, last week we had, was it last week or the week before? Maybe you guys can remind me, but I'm pretty sure it was last week where we had that beautiful young male leopard sleeping by the waterhole here at Rosie's. Just to the right of that tree trunk, that dead tree trunk. But no such luck this afternoon, it seems, but you never know. As I mentioned, on Tuesday, we've been getting such great sightings of the predators at all the different cameras over the last few weeks, from the lions to the leopard. We've even had some wild dogs hanging around. So you never know what might pop out. Of course, all the shows are live, so we never know what to expect. It looks like for now, all is quiet in the world of Rosie's Pan. Let's head on over to the river at Olifants and see what we've got there. Quick hello to Rob from the UK. Thanks for joining us, Rob. And Susie, thank you for the get well message. I'm all right. Gave myself a good cup of tea. Right as rain. Not as healthy as this little crocodile. Of course, this is a chap that seems to hang around on this sandbank most afternoons. You can see he's got his mouth open right at the camera. Check if he's got any cavities. And of course, that's just a method for them to regulate temperature. More often than not, when the mouth is open like that, they're actually looking to cool down. So probably a fairly warm afternoon at Oliphants. Of course, another way to cool down is simply to go into the water, but for crocodiles, conserving energy is paramount. They're about this size for the majority of the time. Their prey species would be fish, various aquatic species in the water. Occasionally, maybe a small chick falling out of the nest of a stork's nest or a egret's nest. Fish, definitely the predominant diet for most crocodiles, really. It's only in certain locations that you'll see them taking down large numbers of antelope, and even then, a crocodile taking down something as big as a wildebeest could last it a few days, even a couple of weeks, and depending on the season, perhaps even up to a month. And there's some record of crocodiles not eating for 3 months. Doesn't sound like something I would be too keen on. About 3 hours is my limit. I'm not sure about the rest of you. Oh, we've got a little head movement from the crocodile there. I think that's about as much action as we'll see from him this afternoon. Let's head on over to Kwamaritan. We've got some elephants hanging out right in front of the lodge. Hopefully Kwamaritan has some guests so that they can enjoy these big grey pachyderms hanging out in front of their rooms. Looks like there's some people in the background there. For those of you who haven't been on safari, many of our safari locations don't have any fences around them. And those that do, more often than not, will have just a single electrified line to keep the elephants out. They can, of course, be the most damaging. Certainly not in a malicious way. They simply weigh 4 to 6 tons, and if they step on a wooden walkway, it tends to be the end of that wooden walkway. My time spent managing camps up in Botswana, where we were fortunate enough to have a massive population of elephants in that region. A lot of my day in the winter was spent chasing elephants with pots and pans to keep them away from our wooden walkways. Before anyone asks, yes, when an elephant decides that it doesn't want to move, the pots and pans don't work. And you just got to live with the visitor. This guy's hiding away from us for now. Let's pop over to Nkoro. It looks like we've got a nice little herd of blue wildees. blue wildebeest, all hanging out together. A decent-sized herd of them. Remember, down here in South Africa, we don't tend to get the huge herds that you see in East Africa. Very different environment in terms of the bush and savanna. We have a lot of little broadleaf woodland forested areas. Certainly in the low veld where we are now, areas where we have a lot of rolling hills, dry riverbeds, and these little drainage lines where often you'll see these lines of trees. You can see it quite nicely in this shot, actually. And in between that, these open areas of savanna and grassland. Ooh, looks very peaceful here. It's nice to see them in a group like that. A question from Marcel. You heard a story that crocs in the Mara River, Kenya, are able to only eat during the migration. The rest of the year, nothing. You think this might be true? Marcel, it's possible. You know, the bigger crocodiles are known to be able to go many months without feeding if they get something big. As I mentioned, it all depends on their activity levels, and crocodiles are really able to slow their metabolic systems down significantly if you need be. But to only eat once a year, I would be quite surprised by that. I think what they might mean by that sort of comment is that, you know, many of the wildebeest drown rather than being taken by crocodiles. Even hippos will actually take some wildebeest that time of year, mainly because of their territorial nature than their taste for flesh. But the vast majority of the gnu actually do drown instead of being taken by predators. So I suspect what they mean by eating once a year is it's likely that you'll have carcasses in the area for weeks, even months, that are not eaten by anything because it's just such a time of plenty. And that means for many of the crocodiles, they'll be able to feast for a couple of months on end. They very happily will eat pretty putrid flesh if they need to. And say because of that, it wouldn't surprise me too much that they would eat in those few months of the year. But I'd be surprised if there was nothing in between. I think they'd probably supplement their diet with fish, particularly in the dry seasons and shallower parts of the water, as we often see on the cameras here. When the rivers dry up and the water holes dry up, you see those catfish and barbel, tilapia getting stuck in the shallow water. Makes for pretty easy eating for the crocs. But a good question. Thanks, Marcel. Let's head over to Tau if we up and running there. Been over to Tau in a while. Here we are at the very dry Tau. Not unsurprising to see at this time of year. I know many of you will remember back to February when everything was wonderful and green and there was vegetation everywhere. That is, of course, no longer the case, but pretty typical of the cycle. That area is very dry. A lot of parts or times of the year. Just popped over to Willie Funt's as well and see what we've got hanging around. Looks like a little waterbuck hanging out in the middle of the river. And we've seen some good action around. It's a female waterbuck in the front and the beautiful long-horned male following behind. This, of course, a pretty good reflection on why they're called waterbuck. They spend the majority of their time, of course, around water. Very good swimmers. They can utilize the rivers as a place to flee if they're chased by predators. It's not a foolproof plan, of course. Sometimes it can get them in trouble. There are predators in the water, as we spoke about. The waterbuck, a pretty significant prey species for crocodile. You'd need a pretty large croc to take one of them down. Certainly one of our prettiest antelope species. Antelope that looks as though it's sat on a freshly painted toilet seat. Let's go over to Nkoro again and see what we've got hanging around there. Looks like it's just the wildebeest for now. A nice video from Nkoro from a while back now. This was of a hyena. But a very interesting behavior to show to you. It's a pretty interesting clip. Just watch right from the beginning. You'll see it on the bottom right of your screen. He goes. Now it's hard to tell what that is. It might be a young impala. And whether or not the hyena actually killed it or not is difficult to say. But a very common behavior that we see with hyena, they'll often stash the kill in the water like that, even if they've stolen it from another predator, especially if they're on their own. So when you see them heading off like this, and this one looks quite big, likely a big female, she may well be heading back to the den with that big kill, but a really interesting sighting, and again, not something we see every day, and that happened right here at Nkoro as well. And then another little clip for Nkoro. These are just one of the most popular little bird species that we see. And interestingly, not something that we see all the time, but always exciting when they do come around. And let's see. A little bit of bird knowledge. Anyone out there know what species of bird this is? short and sweet, but very beautiful. So I'll give you a few minutes and see if anyone knows what colorful bird species that was visiting coral. And then let's pop over to Tembe again. We've got a couple of visitors of the big grey form again, and this time we've got a few breeding herds. It looks like they've arrived. You can see a few of the youngsters in amongst the adults. It's lovely to see such good numbers. The elephants around again. As we've touched on many times, we often don't see the elephants for a significant period. During the rainy season, where they move into the other parts of the reserve. Everyone looks like they're happily milling about for the time being. A question from Pat, who asks, are crocodiles on the menu for humans? Looks like a fairly significant family disagreement happening amongst the elephants here. Looks like two males having a fairly significant disagreement. So let's answer your question there first, Pat. Do crocodiles on the menu? It's not a popular meal or dish in South Africa. But it is something that you'll see from time to time. Crocodiles are actually farmed in Africa. And from those farms, sometimes you'll get a few crocodile tails that they will utilize at certain specialized restaurants. Some of the lodges sometimes will serve crocodile if the guests want to give it a try. But it's not a common thing on the menu. For the most part, we don't see a lot of the big terrestrial predators on the menu at all. I hope that answers your question. I've tried crocodile. And it's not bad. Unsurprisingly tastes like chicken. But yeah, it's not my favorite. And as I say, it's not something you would find in supermarkets in Africa for sure. I'm just having a look to see if any of you have guessed right on those birds. Marcel guesses 2 lovebirds. A few of you got a few guesses in here of different species of colorful birds. We've got green pigeon. No, it's not either of those. Those were, in fact, brown-headed parrots. So again, not terribly common. They've got a very recognizable call, but certainly one of the most popular when you do see them, just because of their coloration. Looks like things have become a little bit more peaceful again. And then while we're looking at these ellies, Jean from the UK asked, do baby ellies feed from other females in the group as well as their mom? Jean, it's a good question. If the mom is still alive in the herd, it's unlikely that they would share, or that the baby would nurse from others in the herd. They get quite picky and they'll often chase off any youngsters that try. It does happen from time to time, but it's not terribly common. But if one of the moms does actually die, often another one of the females, if she is lactating, will help with nursing the baby. So it really depends on the situation. I've seen elephants many times chase off calves who attempt to drink from another mom. And they often go squealing back to mom immediately after. Out of necessity, I certainly have heard of other females taking over. Generally, that would be for a shorter period. You'd have the youngster would be forced to be weaned much earlier than otherwise. Seen elephants actually still nursing at around 4 years old. For the most part, at around 2 years or so, they're pretty much completely weaned. A beautiful elephant posing in the background there. Its trunk up, now giving itself a scratch behind the ear. A lovely sight here at Tembe this afternoon. A very peaceful afternoon show. Thank you for joining us, everybody. It's always my pleasure to do these with you. Thank you for the questions and interaction. Always interested to hear what you've got to say. But as always, a big thank you for joining us. I hope you all have a wonderful weekend ahead. I hope some of that time is spent checking out the cameras. As I say, lots of good action around in the early evenings and early mornings at the moment, particularly of the predator variety. Most afternoons around this time, we're getting amazing numbers of elephants other herbivores. So keep your eyes out, everybody. Remember to spread the word, let your friends know about us, and of course, join us on the Facebook page. But for now, I'm going to get back to my cup of tea, and I hope all of you have a wonderful, peaceful, and healthy weekend. And I'll see you all again next Tuesday.